In this lecture, I wanted to break down what goes into a body paragraph in an essay. Okay, I'm not talking about the introduction. That follows very different rules, and we will cover that later on in the semester. I'm talking only about the supporting paragraphs, the body paragraphs, the paragraphs that occur in the middle of the essay. It is not the introduction, it is not the conclusion. Okay? There is an interactive handout for these slides for this lecture that I'd like you to answer while I go through. Okay. But on top of that, even though it's not a requirement, I highly suggest you take some Cornell notes. This is a very important lecture, and we're going to be going over these throughout the entire semester. Keep in mind that out of all of the other paragraphs in your essay, there will be more body paragraphs than any other, which means the majority of your grade will come from what gets written in your body paragraphs. So just so you know, this is very important to try to, remember and understand what goes into a body paragraph so you can get the best grade possible. Paragraphs have specific, complicated goals to accomplish. They have to be specific, separate ideas, yet still relate to each other and to the thesis. They have to stay on topic, but not be repetitive. They have to use examples, but avoid simple plot summary. They have to contain a main point and analyze that main point. How is it possible to do this? And is there some easy way to organize a paragraph? Maybe. Here's an analogy that some students have found useful. Think of a sandwich. To be a sandwich, you have to have 2 pieces of bread, whatever kind, and stuff in between it, right? So here's what you would put in a paragraph sandwich. So the paragraph sandwich has 3 elements. A point, which is a topic sentence. That is 1 to 2 sentences telling the reader what the main point of the paragraph is. Okay? And that's at the very beginning of the paragraph. The second thing that goes in between the point and the end of the paragraph is an example, what I call an illustrative example, or what other people call evidence. You use quotes and examples from readings, specific events or stories from your life to support your main point, which is the point of the paragraph, the topic sentence. Then you followed up with the last piece of bread. You explain or analyze how your point and your example work together. You explain why, what, and how your information reflects your point. You spend time telling us what it means, how it works, and why you're right. So in this slide, I have an example, all right, of a draft. Keep in mind, this is a draft paragraph, and it's not complete. So I'm going to read this paragraph, and afterwards in the interactive questions, you're going to answer some questions I have listed, okay? Here's the example of a body paragraph. Some sexist commercials include those for Giggle Wiggle, Shark Attack, and Frog Soccer. For instance, in the Giggle Wiggle commercial, 4 people play the game, 2 boys and 2 girls. During the game, only the boys move the game pieces, shouting enthusiastically when they've made the right moves, while the girls, basically motionless, smile vacantly and watch the boys. At the end of the game, one of the boys wins and gleefully shouts, I win," while clapping his hands. Only then does a girl jump up and speak her one line, oh wow. Okay, that's a pretty funny commercial, okay? Now, knowing that the topic or the thing at the top says what's missing, it should be pretty clear that this body paragraph is not complete. Okay, so keep that in mind while you answer the following questions. Question 1. What is the writer's argument? What is the writer trying to prove? What does the writer think about the commercial? What is the writer's reaction? What is the point of sharing the commercial with the reader? Go ahead and answer those questions, and then I'll explain what's missing in the paragraph. As you may have noticed, there is no actual argument, or there's a very light one. If we look at the very first sentence, it says some sexist commercials include those for Giggle Wiggle, Shark Attack, and Frog Soccer. Now, this implies that those commercials are sexist and that the writer is going to explain how they are sexist. The problem is they don't tell us how. They just say that they are. Okay. So they are just merely stating this as a fact, and they're saying that they're going to include 3 examples. That's too many examples in one body paragraph. Okay. In a paragraph, or in a successful paragraph, this writer would have told us exactly how it is sexist. They would state it. They would say, the Giggle Wiggle, commercial is sexist because, and then tell us why. And they would be very, very specific, not general. Okay. As we read through the paragraph, we are essentially experiencing the commercial as it's happening, right? We can see it in our heads. In some ways, this is actually a really good illustrative example. I mean, I would take notes on, like, okay, how did this person make it so that I saw what they saw? Because I felt like I was watching this commercial. That means that it's actually a really good illustrative example. The problem is there's no real opinion that it's illustrating. Is just showing us a commercial, right? So in terms of an illustrative example, I think they did pretty well. But in terms of a point, I'm still not sure how it's sexist. It's all implied, but it's not stated. And in a paragraph, you can't just imply things. You have to overtly state them for the reader. The next question was, what does the writer think about the commercial? Well, we know the writer thinks it's sexist, but how so? And what is their definition of sexism? Where are they going with this, right? We're not really sure. What is the writer's reaction? We don't know. We don't get a reaction, right? And what's the point of sharing the commercial with the reader? We're not really sure. I mean, essentially, it seems as if the point is, here, I found a sexist commercial. You watch and you tell me, right? Well, you don't want to do that in an essay. You don't want the reader to say, "Oh, well, here's my opinion," right? You want them to adopt your opinion. And if you don't, give your opinion and break down the steps you went through to get to your opinion, right? It's going to be really hard for your reader to agree with you. Okay, so on your interactive handout, you're going to find another activity right after this one. All right, and it says find pi. Can you find pi in the following paragraph? And in this one, there's a really long paragraph. Okay, and it asks you to color code PINE. So for each element of the body paragraph, I'd like you to pick a different color. So P would get a different color from I, and I would get a different color from E. And I want you to find the pieces in the paragraph and highlight them to, categorize them correctly. So in the example, as you read, it says, many sexist children's television commercials lead me to believe that girls rarely see images of themselves in active or winning situations. Often the boy wins the game being advertised, where the girl, pretty little objects, serve as mindless cheerleaders. Some of these commercials include those for Giggle Wiggle, Shark Attack, and Frog Soccer. For instance, in the Giggle Wiggle commercial, 4 people play the game, 2 boys and 2 girls. During the game, only the boys move the game pieces, shouting enthusiastically when they've made the right moves, while the girls, basically motionless, smile vacantly and watch the boys. At the end of the game, one of the boys wins and gleefully shouts, I win, while clapping his hands. Only then does a girl jump up and speak her one line, oh wow. The boy is the winner, the girl merely there to watch. The boy participates actively while the girl engages passively, only revealing her presence in support of the boy's success. The winning kid was not only rude but annoying. In this commercial, as in others, the girls were not the central characters but part of the support network for the winners, the boys. In fact, I never saw a girl win a game in any of the children's commercials I viewed. These subtle statements in commercials can make a person think that it's okay to be sexist when in fact it is not. Since so many children watch TV and since they are just beginning to learn gender roles, they are especially vulnerable to these sexist messages and can consequently internalize sexist attitudes towards others and themselves. Girls grow up believing that only boys can play and win exciting games, while boys learn that girls must wait, watch, support, and celebrate the boys' achievements. In essence, getting to play is a gendered privilege. So go ahead, highlight what you think is a point, highlight the text you feel is an illustrative example, and highlight the text you feel is analysis or explanation. Okay, now that you're done highlighting the point, the illustrative example, and the explanation, let me break down what I think are PINE. All right. So in this example, the very beginning should start with a topic sentence. All right. This one says, many sexist children's television commercials lead me to believe that girls rarely see images of themselves in active or winning situations. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to highlight that. I don't know, teal, right? This sentence is implying that children's commercials don't see images of themselves and are therefore sexist. Note how they say why, right? They don't just say this is a sexist commercial. See here, look for yourself. They don't do that. They say this is a sexist commercial and this is why it's sexist and who it's sexist to, right? I mean, it could have been sexist to the boys. In the second sentence, it says often the boy wins the game being advertised while the girls' pretty little objects serve as mindless cheerleaders. Okay, so this could go either way. This could be part of the topic sentence. In this way, the author is previewing the point they're going, or the illustrative example they're going to give. They're like, "Hey, I'm going to show you how exactly this is sexist and how it's going to play out in that example." Okay. So in this way, they now have a 2-sentence topic sentence. And you can do that. You can have more than one sentence as your topic sentence. This one just gets a little bit more specific in the second sentence. Okay. Then the middle part should look familiar. Some of these commercials include those for Giggle Wiggle, Shuck Attack, and Frog Soccer. And then we get to see the whole commercial. Note that it's a good example. It's good because it's got detail. You can see the commercial playing in your head. That's a good illustrative example. That's a good command of language to be able to paint a picture in the reader's head like that so well that you see the commercial happening as you read. So this whole example, I would highlight and call that the illustrative example. The key is to know where it ends, right? Well, when I'm reading it, while clapping his hands, only then does a girl jump up and speak her one line. Oh, wow. The boy is the winner, the girl merely there to watch. Ah, okay. So I'm going to end it here like it was in that previous example. And this will be our illustrative example. Okay. And I'm going to make that yellow. Everything below it should be explanation. Now, why did I stop it there? What's the difference between an illustrative example and explanation? The illustrative example is just a fact. It's unchanging. It's just the commercial. They're just showing you a visual representation of something that cannot change. Okay? But the next sentence, the boy is the winner, the girl merely there to watch, is an interpretation, right? Someone else could interpret that commercial in a different way. They may, quote unquote, see it a different way. All right? Maybe the girl is not just there merely to watch, right? Maybe someone else could see that commercial and say, no, that girl is part of the support network for the boys. Then the boys can't figure the games out on their own. I don't know, right? But note how this is an opinion. This is a reaction to a fact, to a description, to a commercial. When it becomes a reaction, when it becomes an interpretation, an opinion from an author, that's when you know it's no longer the illustrative example. They've now moved into analysis where they're going to break down their thinking and their opinion. Okay, so that's why I'm going to highlight the rest of this purple. And that's to note that it is all explanation. Okay, things to look for. Note that the explanation is almost, but probably twice as long as that illustrative example. Your analysis should be longer, much longer, at least twice as long as your illustrative example, okay? Because it is more important than your example. Examples are great. I mean, we need them to understand your point, but it's more important that you break down where your logic went in order to get to the point that you got to, okay? Because that's the point of the essay. The point of the essay is not just throw a bunch of examples at your reader that will magically add up to them adopting your opinion. It's to serve you. It's to help the reader, but it's also to help you convince the reader that you are correct in some way, or that your opinion is valid in some way, and then you follow it up with an explanation of, where you got your ideas, what's the background, where are you coming from, what is your interpretation of this, revealing that all to the reader. And in a way, you're kind of guiding the reader to see it the way you see it. They're following your logical steps to come to the same conclusion that you made by writing the essay. So how did you do? How, did you correctly identify each piece of the paragraph as P-I-N-E? If not, that's okay. Sometimes we just revise our understanding and we move forward. If you're still confused, do not hesitate to ask a question in that question forum, or come during office hours, or see a tutor. Okay. But I highly encourage you to come ask me questions, because I will break that down for you even more if you need more help, or you don't quite understand why I made the choices that I made. So next, I would like to talk about an example that might end up in your essay. What would a pie paragraph look like in response to the essay prompt that I've given you? It's important not to copy my work, okay? And this is just one example of many different types of answers that you're going to get and that you might have in the essay. I am not saying I actually even support this opinion. I just wrote an opinion, okay, as an example of what it might look like in your essay. So in this example, I've got a topic sentence. The topic sentence is an argument, okay? It answers the task on the prompt, all right? So keep that in mind as I read. The topic sentence, or the point for this body paragraph, is the purpose of college is to prepare students for the workforce, which is why college is so expensive. If the purpose of college wasn't to get a good paying job, I wouldn't be able to pay off all these loans. All right. So note how it is 1 to 2 sentences long. And this one is 2 sentences. It answers the main question on the prompt, which is, what is the purpose of college? Right? And then it goes on and it answers why or how so. Okay? Why is it expensive? Well, because you're going to get a good paying job as a result, right? How so? Well, how would I be able to pay all these loans if I didn't get a good job by the time I was done, right? So note that some of you might think, wow, this is a really specific point. How am I going to write more later? Believe it or not, although it goes against, maybe your basic understanding of how writing works, the more specific you are, the more you actually can say. The more vague you are, the less you can say. If you're really broad and vague, you never figure out what it is you're truly, what your true opinion is, right? You essentially what they call grabbing at straws, to get an idea across to the reader. But if you're really, really specific, right, you can talk a lot more specifically about what your opinion is, where it might go, what an example might be. You can say a lot more when you're specific than when you're vague. So one rule that you might be learning right now about the topic sentence is how specific it actually is, because it is quite specific. Okay, so with that point in mind, let's look at the example a student might give to support their opinion. Their illustrative example is, my major is accounting. Because I'm good with numbers, and entry-level positions pay between 45,000 and 80,000 a year. I chose this major because it will directly result in a job right out of college, one of the few majors that do. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother to accrue $60,000 in debt. Note how this example illustrates and provides a specific example that supports the point, the topic sentence, which is the purpose of college is to get a job. And they mention loans and they mention how much they're going to get paid, right? So this example is supporting, it's illustrating, right, their point of view. It is specific. Note that the numbers are very specific, $45,000 to $80,000. Note how it's an entry-level position, okay? Not like a manager or something that takes, training and time at a job to be able to get. They reveal their major, and it's a specific major. It's accounting. It doesn't just say my major is math, right? It's too vague, right? We want to be more specific. They are even more specific on how much debt they probably will accrue, right, over time. So it includes specific details like how much an accountant makes out of college and how much debt they may accrue to earn their bachelor's degree. Now, the third part is the explanation. Right off, just notice by the look of it how much longer it is than the illustrative example. Okay, so at a bare minimum, your explanation needs to be twice as long as your illustrative example, because examples and points never ever speak for themselves. You have to speak for them. Okay, so here is a draft example explanation for that point in that illustrative example. I don't want to take any risks in the job market, especially considering how expensive college is. It's expensive because the skills a student learns are valuable and will translate into a career that pays more than a job that doesn't require a college degree. Choosing accounting was a financial strategic choice. It won't take me very long to pay off my bills if I am careful with my spending, and by then I'll have received raises. Since many college graduates can't start careers right away because they earn degrees that don't translate into the current job market, like art or drama, they can't afford the loan payments, which begin 6 months after graduation. My decision to come to college is practical and money driven. I'm surprised students invest so much money in majors like that because they won't get an adequate return on the investment. Okay. So, again, this isn't my opinion. I just needed to be opinionated to give you an example. Okay. But I'm not sharing my personal opinion on this topic. This is just a sample opinion that a student may have. Okay. So this explanation is at least twice as long as the illustrative example. It refers back to the example and applies the writer's opinion. So note how they didn't run away from the example and never mentioned it again. They did mention the example again. They talked about the detail about their major, what they were majoring in, and how much they were making, and how that applies to their understanding of what the purpose of college is to make money, and that relationship to the cost of it. Okay, so when you have a point and an example, they need to work together, and you need to be able to, in your explanation, explain that connection. Okay. One other thing that you might want to keep in mind is that I'm using the word I. You may have been told in the past that you shouldn't use I in an essay. And I will say that in the future, college teachers may tell you to do that. They will say, don't use I. But for the purposes of my class and my teaching, I like I. I use I's in my own essays, and I encourage you to use them as well. Okay. Now, that might lead to redundant writing. You might say, I think. Well, there's no reason to say, I think, because everything you write is what you're thinking, right? So you might want to be careful and not, overuse it, or at least, use it redundantly. But I do expect you and think that you will use I in your essays, because a lot of your examples will come from your experience, and it would be very odd to try to remove the I from your own experience. Okay. And lastly, in that little bubble at the bottom, it says it explains the relationship to the future salary and accrued loans mentioned as the whys and hows of the point. So, another way to think about an explanation is that it's prompting you to ask how, what, and why of yourself. How is this the purpose of college? What does loans have to do with anything? Why an accountant? How come you need a good job to pay off these loans, right? It's answering these questions over and over again for the reader so that by the time they finish the paragraph, they shouldn't have any questions. So, what does this paragraph look like altogether? Well, here it is. This is a complete pie paragraph that you could put in an academic essay, and in fact would be an adequate paragraph in response to the essay prompt that you'll be writing on over the weekend. Okay, here is the paragraph. The purpose of college is to prepare students for the workforce, which is why college is so expensive. If the purpose of college wasn't to get a good paying job, I wouldn't be able to pay off all these loans. My major is accounting because I'm good with numbers, and entry level positions pay between $45,000 to $80,000 a year. I chose this major because it will directly result in a job right out of college, one of the few majors that do. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother to accrue $60,000 in debt. I don't want to take any risks in the job market, especially considering how expensive college is. It's expensive because the skills a student learns are valuable and will translate into a career that pays more than a job that doesn't require a college degree. Choosing accounting was a financial strategic choice. It won't take me very long to pay off my bills if I am careful with my spending, and by then I'll have received raises. Since many college graduates can't start careers right away because they earn degrees that don't translate into the current job market, like art or drama, they can't afford the loan payments, which begin 6 months after graduation. My decision to come to college is practical and money driven. I'm surprised students invest so much money in majors like that because they won't get an adequate return on their investment. Note how this is very opinionated. It is supposed to be. Okay. Your essays should be your opinion, they should be arguments. All right. And you should already know that some people are not going to agree with you. I don't necessarily even agree with this point of view. And I wrote this paragraph, right? If you have read my bio on the introduction forum on Canvas, you'll see that I actually do have one of these degrees that this mythical person claimed was, worthless. And that's okay. I mean, that was the opinion that I, came up with at the time, right? But my degree is in creative writing, right? It is an art degree, and I did have a lot of loans to pay off as a result. So I don't necessarily agree with this point of view. But if I don't agree, I would have to follow it up with uh, a paragraph that responds to this one, right? Or keeps this in mind as I'm trying to get my point of view across. I know this is really confusing because I wrote this one and then I'm also not even agreeing with the one, but you get what I'm trying to say. Anyway, I hope this was helpful in seeing how you might respond to the prompt. But please do not just copy what I said here, okay? Because that would be plagiarism. You have to come up with your own points and your own opinions, okay? Let's reflect on everything that we've learned so far in this lecture. In your interactive handout, I would like you to answer the following questions. I want you to select one paragraph that you have outlined for your essay. You did this in a previous lecture where you did the writing steps or the writing process, okay? So, or you may have revised your outline by now, I don't know, but just take a look at your outline. Pick one body paragraph that you need to work with, okay? And try writing a pie paragraph. I want you to include a point, which is the topic sentence, an illustrative example, and an explanation how, what, and why. And you're going to write that in your interactive handout. Okay? Now that you've written a paragraph and gone through all these lecture slides, let's reflect on your understanding of paragraphs, or at least body paragraphs. So, what I would like you to do is to answer these two questions. In the past, what was your understanding of the purpose of a paragraph in an essay? How have you revised your understanding of a body paragraph in an essay? And that's it.